22nd. The emperor much better. His strength and appetite had returned, and he had been 4 hours seriously engaged at work. He had kept the Grand Marshal and his family to dinner, and was pleased and happy. His sufferings had slumbered during a whole day. They might never wake again. He was full of hope. When my health is once reestablished, I shall restore you to your studios. You shall proceed to Europe and publish your works. I will not suffer you to waste your existence on this horrible rock. You have told me, if I recollect rightly, that you do not know France. You will then see that country. You will see those canals, those monuments with which I covered it during the time of my power. The duration of that power has been like that of a flash of lightning. But no matter. It is filled with useful institutions. Immortal Sire, Cherbourg, Turin, Antwerp. I have done better than all that. What then, sire? What prodigy? I waited for his answer. Yes, doctor, I have done better. I have hallowed the revolution by infusing it into our laws. My code is the sheet anchor which will save France and entitle me to the benedictions of posterity. Besides that, there are, as you were saying, establishments, foundations, Flushing, Corfu, Ostend, Alps leveled. The plan of that undertaking is one of the first formed at the commencement of my career. I had entered Italy, and finding that the communications with Paris occupied a considerable time and were attended with much difficulty, I endeavored to render them quicker and resolved to open them through the valley of the Rhone. I also wished to render that river navigable and blow up the rock under which it engulfs and disappears. I had sent engineers on the spot. The expense would have been inconsiderable, and I submitted the plan to the directory, but we were carried away by events. I went to Egypt, and nobody thought any more about it. On my return, I took it up again. I had dismissed the lawyers, and having no more obstacles in my way, we applied our hammers to the Alps. We executed what the Romans had not dared to try, and traced through blocks of granite a solid and spacious road, capable of resisting the efforts of time, but not those of Piedmontese industry. How so? Do the Piedmontese spoil that road? I have heard so. That is not right. I was entitled to a little more respect from the House of Savoy. Napoleon then entered into numerous details respecting the armistice of Carrasco, the democratic fervor of the Directory, and its repugnance for peace when he insisted on the ratification of the treaty. What? With the despot, was the reply. His resources are immense. We will stir up popular commotions against him. We will excite the valleys to revolt. But his troops, they must be seduced. In fact, there was no kind of trick and chicanery to which Talleyrand did not resort in order to avoid signing the treaty, as the following letter will exemplify. 30th Fructidor, 5th year of the Republic, to General Bonaparte. I add in my dispatches of this day some explanations upon objects which have not seemed to me of a nature to appear amongst the official documents, but concerning which it is nevertheless proper you should receive some information. The Directory refused to sign the treaty with the King of Sardinia. There would be a kind of inconsistency in our binding ourselves by solemn treaties with the monarchy, the speedy destruction of which might be the result of our operations in Italy. We should be accused of the same kind of Machiavellianism which the King of Prussia behaved in Poland. Besides, the article of the treaty upon which the King of Sardinia lays the greatest stress is that by which the security of his kingdom is guaranteed, and we cannot give the kings a guarantee against the people. Such an engagement would lead us to wage war against the same principles for which we have hitherto fought, and which we, the greatest part of our victories, that of Piedmont, situated as it is between France and Italy, both free, will become what it may. All we can do in that country is to let things follow their natural course. You therefore cannot have the 10,000 Piedmontese that have been promised to you, but there is nothing to prevent you from having as many soldiers from this country as you wish. There is no want here of men willing to fight for liberty. and under your orders, all revolutionists will immediately come forward. It will be sufficient for you to induce the Cisalpine Republic to enlist, pay, and equip them. You will thus have the little army which the King of Sardinia was to furnish, and we shall have no obligation to a prince of the House of Bourbon. It is very probable that the court of Turin will not oppose the raising these levies, and that it will perhaps be very glad to be rid of some individuals who give her cause for uneasiness, and this measure useful to us will thus retard the explosion there. The only difficulty consists in paying them. I am aware that the Cisalpine Republic already pays a great deal, but it is only money, and France has paid a much dearer price for her liberty. It is, besides, greatly for her interest that this measure should take place, and if the campaign opens again, it will be more on her account than on ours. With respect to Mr. Tugut, who is the sovereign of Vienna and who preaches the continuation of war against the opinion of the emperor and wishes of the people, he is a man whom he ought to have undermined before this time. He has always demanded and obtained money for leading his masters into the most detestable affairs. You will find in the instructions given to Clark some information respecting an old piece of treachery which has already been communicated to the Grand Duke of Tuscany. You may cause some allusion to be made to this circumstance in the newspapers of Italy, which are most read at Vienna, and in such a way as to make him fear that more might be said. And if afterwards war does take place, the traitor must be totally unmasked, and the official documents published in order that it may be known at Vienna and all over Europe that he has formerly received and still receives money, and that he is the sole cause of a war which he only prolongs to favor England and increase the treasure with which she supplies him. If anything that excites surprise, it will be our having so long delayed the publication of such facts, and at last they must come to the knowledge of the emperor. On our side, we shall labor to turn in our favor the opinion of Europe, which is in great part already with us. This is an expedient, or rather a weapon, which we must not neglect. We intend to circulate documents that will clearly make it appear that the courts of Vienna and London were quite agreed with the faction which has just been upset in France, and will show how far the negotiations of the two courts and the movements of the interior proceeded simultaneously. The common and evident object of the members of Clichy and of the cabinet of the emperor was the reestablishment of the King of France and a degrading peace by which Italy was to be restored to her former masters. Should they talk to you about equilibrium and the balance of Europe, how much will you not have it in your power to say respecting Poland, which has so materially increased the power of Austria, and respecting which the Directory has condescended to forbear pronouncing during the course of the negotiation, through continually prompted to do so by the interest which they take in the fate of the Poles and of their country. If you find that the negotiation cannot be brought to a favorable issue, you will then prosecute the plan for the expulsion of the House of Austria, and in that case you will feel that the neutrality of Tuscany must not be regarded. Monsieur Talleyrand, 24th. The emperor had continued well during the remainder of yesterday. He had passed the greatest part of the night reading newspapers and was engaged in the same occupation when I saw him this morning at 10 o'clock. At 2 o'clock p.m., he took a bath in which he remained half an hour. His strength increased and the state of costiveness diminished, but he complained of an acute pain in the right hypochondriac region, which extended as far as the breast on the same side. 25th. The emperor, after having experienced a violent pain in the frontal region, was seized with a kind of drowsiness. He took foot bath into which some mustard seeds were thrown and found relief from it. He complained of the miserable state of his health. Can anything be more deplorable than my present condition? This is not life, it is mere existence. My health will never be restored. Even my present situation must be precarious, and perhaps death will soon terminate my sufferings. He recommended to me the autopsy of his corpse. We are not come to that, sire, answered I. If your majesty will only condescend to follow the treatment I have prescribed, you are not near the term of your career. I should wish to believe you, doctor, but the blisters dry very quickly. They will soon resume energy if your majesty will, blank. Medicines again? You are a doctor and would promise life to a corpse if it could take pills. But I do not deceive myself. I feel that I am near my end. All the powers of the vital functions are concentrated on the spot which the cantharides have excited. You will keep them on a week or 10 days longer, when you will have obtained all the effect that possibly can be expected from them. In that case, sire, we might try an issue. No, Corvisar had open one, but it is too troublesome and inconvenient. I will not have any. 26. Napoleon worse than yesterday. General Attony, icy coldness at the extremities in spite of every means I could devise to restore warmth to them. Excessive paleness. At 3 o'clock, the emperor went to the Grand Marshal's, where he remained till 6. During that interval, he was seized with a shivering in all his frame, accompanied by excessive thirst. He drank lemonade and caused a large fire to be lighted, near which he endeavored to warm himself. His strength was entirely exhausted. In what a state am I, doctor? Everything seems to weigh upon me, to fatigue me. I can scarcely support myself. You have not, amongst the resources of your art, any means of reviving the play of the machine? He accompanied this with a gesture indicating the whole frame. I told him that medicine possessed many such means, prompt and efficacious. Sire, time. Ah, yes, time. You beguile pain, and death puts an end to it. 27th and 28th, same state, pulse weak and agitated. No improvement. 29th, the state of weakness had increased. Deep pain in the right hypochondriac region, abundant evacuations of ill-digested matter. These evacuations had already lasted some days. I endeavored to obviate the serious consequences to which a continuation of such a state might lead, and instead upon the necessity of a medical treatment. I dropped a few observations upon the alteration which had taken place in the functions of the stomach as well as the liver. The emperor hastily took them up. What are you saying about the stomach? No, sir, to minus sound, and that I have never in any place or under any circumstances suffered the slightest pain from it. Therefore, no more on that subject. Do you hear? 30th. The emperor very pale and complaining of his extreme weakness. He had a violent headache and felt an annoying pain along the third part of the lower extremity of the right leg in the right hypochondriac region and in the epigastric region during the night evacuation of bilious matters. He refused to take any medicine. 31st. Napoleon worse than yesterday. He had passed a very restless night and had successively 8 evacuations of liquid matters and undigested substances. The pain in the head and in the right hypochondriac region was still as violent, pulse low and agitated. During the day, 3 evacuations similar to those of the night. The patient was lying on a sofa under several coverings, though the thermometer of Fahrenheit was at 65 to 66 degrees. The lower extremities almost constantly cold. He persisted in refusing to take any medicines. I prescribed a strict diet, rice water. Towards the evening, pulse more regular but weak, and Napoleon felt rather better. He complained that the skin upon which the blisters had been applied was still red, and occasioned a sensation of excessive irritation. November 1st, the emperor had passed a tolerable night and had only 1 evacuation of the same nature as the preceding. Pulse irregular, nervous, pain in the head, rather violent, digestion very laborious. Though the patient had taken but very little food, the stomach painfully distended by the presence of gas, which occasioned frequent insipid irritations. The pain in the liver had increased. A dry and almost continual cough caused by the state of the stomach produced vomiting of aqueous matters. The icy coldness of the extremities caused a spasmodic contraction of the cerebral nerves. Towards evening, all these symptoms disappeared, and the patient was evidently better. 2nd, after a short slumber, the emperor was awakened at 4 a.m. by a dry and nervous cough accompanied by insipid rectations and vomitings of aqueous matters. Anodyne potions allayed the irritation of these symptoms towards the break of day. At night, the emperor was calm and weak and took some light food. At 3 p.m., the fits of coughing returned, accompanied by frequent rectations of an insipid nature. Pain in the head and the liver, icy coldness of the lower extremities, application of warm towels on the legs, friction on the abdomen with a liniment of ammoniac an opium calming draught. Towards evening, all these alarming symptoms subsided. Third, the emperor had passed a tolerably good night, and there was an evident improvement in the patient's health. The prostration of strength, however, still continued. At 12 o'clock, Napoleon felt a violent pain in the head, coldness, and spasmodic contractions at the lower extremities. He recovered his appetite a little. I proposed tepid baths of sea waters, continued coldness of the extremities, application of warm towels. Fourth, Napoleon rather better, return of appetite, pulse low and regular, tepid bath composed of 2/3 of seawater and 1/3 of soft water, in which the patient remained 35 minutes. Fifth, continued improvement in the emperor's health. He took another bath of sea water, in which he remained about 3/4 of an hour. His sufferings had ceased a while, and he began to talk and converse, passing in review, amongst other topics, the works he had executed and the men he had protected in Italy. He had made roads from Pavia to Padua, from Padua to Fucine and Pontelongo, from Saraval to Belluno and Cadore, and from Vicenza to Novara. He had dug the port of Malamocco, drained the valleys which terminate at Verona, thrown bridges over the Adige, restrained the inundations of the Bacchiglione, raised dikes, reconstructed canals and aqueducts, and yet this was only the beginning of what he had planned for Italy. From the things he had done, the emperor passed to the men he had known and spoke at some length of Cesarati, the pomp and harmony of whose poetry he liked. He had assisted him and loaded him with favors, but hatred followed the abuse of victory. We became odious, we were beaten. The poet yielded to the general feeling of exasperation and applauded our reverses. This error did not, however, deprive him of Napoleon's benevolence, for one of the first things the emperor did after the incorporation of Venice was to recommend Cesarati to Prince Eugene.